is in crisis. And people are looking for hope and answers. Thai PBS World is there with you with the best minds of the day. Join us on Thai PBS World tonight, every weekdays at 7 p.m. Thai PBS World, we bring Thailand to the world.
Swadika, very good evening and welcome to Thai PBS World Tonight. I'm Nad Bunag.
I'm Tulip Naksompoplao.
And the parliamentary session is already over, and we all know that Prime Minister General Prayut Chan-o-cha last night reaffirmed that he will not step down as demanded by the protesters as well as the opposition MPs. And he also warned the political opponents against using foreign forces to destabilize the country. He said in the closing remarks at the two-day extraordinary parliamentary session on the current political crisis that he is not going to walk away while the country is still facing a crisis. General Prayut Chan-o-cha came under heavy attacks throughout the debate, which saw many of the opposition MPs openly siding with the ongoing protests aimed at removing the Prime Minister and having the Constitution Amendment. Gaokai Party leader Pita Limjaroenrat also made a lengthy plea for a reform of the monarchy during the debate. The opposition MP said Thailand's economy under the leadership of Prime Minister Prayut has been in shambles and held him responsible for the ongoing political crisis. They called on the Prime Minister to make sacrifices by resigning. Defending his records, General Prayut Chan-o-cha pointed out several infrastructure and development projects that were implemented under his watch to refute accusations that he was a failure. He also touted his government's success in dealing with the coronavirus pandemic. He asked, would you be happy to have victory amid the rubble, and would it be worth it, in an apparent reference to the ongoing street protests, which his government believes are being fueled by certain quarters of opposition politicians. He accused his opponents of using students as a tool for their political purpose and cautioned them against allowing foreign forces to interfere in the country's domestic affairs. His warning came a day after thousands of protesters rallied at the German embassy in Bangkok to call on the German government to launch an investigation into the frequent visits to Germany by the Thai monarch. General Prayut also insisted that he will continue in office to serve the country. During the debate, the Democrat Party proposed the setting up of a reconciliation panel consisting of key players in the ongoing political conflict. House Speaker Tuan Lik Pai said a working group will be set up to study the proposal, which is aimed at finding common grounds among all stakeholders to resolve the conflict.
So it seems like there will be another panel.
Sort of.
And hopefully there will be something meaningful, constructive, or something really can make a difference come out of that. And talking about what's going on in Thailand, of course, it is something that foreign media are paying attention to, especially the protests and how the government is dealing with that. But Chinese media, the Global Times, is actually funded by the Communist Party, is considered a mouthpiece for Communist Party, and Chinese government had said that there is a conspiracy theory. It says something like the Western power is trying to overthrow the current Thai government. A recent opinion piece in Global Times, an English language publication under the People's Daily, which is an official mouthpiece of the Chinese Communist Party, quickly picked up this conspiracy theory. The headline said, behind the scenes funding of Thailand protests show invisible Western hands. The article noted that it described as a striking similarity between the ongoing protests in Thailand and those in Hong Kong. It said that the protesters attempted to occupy public places, landmarks, and downtown shopping malls. It said that this was all done in a bid to trigger broad attention from the international community. The article also claimed that unidentified Westerners at rallies in Thailand openly instructed students to set up stages and barricades. This is what Global Times report. Global Times also said that there was also a very professional camera team hiding in the crowd to capture touching scenes. These images included protesters kneeling before the officers and armed police swinging batons in front of the unarmed protesters. And it said that such photos went viral on social media platforms. The images were intended to incite ordinary people's hatred against the government and thereby turn them into protesters. And it said this was a clear recruitment campaign. However, the Thai protest leaders have consistently maintained that the ongoing anti-government rallies are organic and rejected claims that they were influenced by foreign forces. However, the Global Times, the tabloid newspaper, the author of this article is a deputy director of the Military Diplomacy Research Center of the College of International Relations of National University of Defense Technology in China. The article that we are talking about noted that some of the pro-democracy movement leaders in Hong Kong have openly expressed their support for their Thai counterparts. And maybe this is the part why the story in Thailand grabs Chinese government attention. The piece said that some Hong Kong rioters, including their leader Joshua Wong, have publicly supported Thai anti-government protests. This reminds people of the group photo featuring Wong and Thanathorn Jingruengruengkit, who served as the leader of Future Forward Party that was dissolved by the Constitutional Court in February. And without any references, Global Times report that the Thai government and mainstream media believes that anti-government protesters have colluded with the US and the other Western countries to use young people with the ultimate goal to overthrow the current political system in Thailand. And it said those forces aim to bring in pro-West political proxies to rule the country with Western-style democracy. It is essentially a color revolution. I think if Thai government really think, or really, I don't know what they think, but if they really said out loud that there will be that there is collusion between protesters and Western government, I am sure it will be a really, really big news in Thailand. But we haven't heard any report of that conspiracy theory from the mainstream media in Thailand or from the government officials itself. The article, however, ends by saying that what is happening in Thailand is in line with the US general practice. The US manipulated color revolutions in the former Soviet Union, the Middle East, and the other countries and regions for its political intentions, leaving many countries in a mess, threatening regional and world peace and stability.
So that's the perspective from the Chinese media on the ongoing Thai protests.
It seems like it's the only media that pick up on the conspiracy theory. It's something that we heard when people chit-chatting about what's going on in Thailand, what is the possibility, but I never think that there will be any media actually pick up on that.
And as we mentioned earlier, the Prime Minister has been pressured to resign by both the protesters as well as the opposition MPs. But so far, he has shown no sign of stepping down. However, there are many experts that believe that there are few possible ways to ease the ongoing tensions as well. So let's take a look at this report.
Political tension in Thailand is nearing boiling point as the two conflicting sides, the anti-establishment movement and the powers that be, show no sign of backing down. The student-led protesters have been rallying non-stop for nearly 4 months now, pushing their three demands: Prime Minister Prayut Chan-o-cha's resignation, a more democratic constitution, and reform of the monarchy. However, there is no sign that the government is willing to grant any of these demands. The embattled Prayut has rejected all calls to quit, while charter change bills proposed by civic groups have almost no chance of being approved by parliamentarians, and there is an unbridgeable gulf separating the reformist and royalist groups when it comes to the monarchy. Over the past few days, non-partisan figures and academics have scrambled to offer possible solutions to ease or end the ongoing political crisis. The proposals include a national referendum, Prayut's resignation, a peace dialogue, speedy passage of charter amendment bills, and avoiding the use of violence against protesters. Somkiat Tangkitwanit, president of the Thailand Development Research Institute, or the TDRI, proposed giving the people sovereign power to resolve the dispute via a national referendum if the parliament fails to find a solution. A referendum should offer both sides enough space to air their arguments freely in a safe environment with no intimidation. This would also help guarantee that both sides accepted the referendum's outcome, in contrast to the doubts that lingered over the referendum on the Constitution in August 2016. Though this option may not solve all conflicts, if all sides accepted the process, then society could move forward. Somkiat also suggested that informal talks should be organized by mediators who are acceptable to both sides. However, the dialogue should be held with a degree of secrecy to prevent each side pressuring negotiators and enable them to adjust their stances without feeling heat from the public spotlight. As the core of conflict, Prayut has been pressured to lead a retreat. Prinya Thewa Narimit, a law professor at Thammasat University, said the first step back will be for Prayut to switch off the Senate's power by amending the charter. Once the senator's power is switched off, Prayut can decide to dissolve the House. But to reassure the public that the junta regime was truly over, he must not accept any invitation to become a prime ministerial candidate for any party again. Alternatively, if he is not willing to work on resolving the crisis, Prayut could simply step down and pave the way for a new prime minister. Veteran political critic Sukhum Nonsakul said the government must pledge to the parliament that it will amend the supreme law in compliance with the people's draft bills, thus paving the way for setting up an elected charter drafting body. Prayut should also send out a clear signal on charter amendment, especially to the Senate, which plays a decisive role in whether or not a bill can pass. Sukhum said Prayut should graciously step down once we have a new constitution. Many academics also believe that the government should not have used force against peaceful protesters as it did on October 16th, when riot police used water cannons to disperse demonstrators at Pathumwan intersection in the heart of the city. TDRI's Somkiat also said the government should release protest leaders arrested on politically motivated charges and listen to their proposals and demands. Likewise, protesters should avoid expressions or gestures that could be seen as provocative and lead to confrontation. All in all, creating the platform where all sides can express their opinion constructively and able to discuss for change civilly would be the ideal way to go. But many also feel that Thailand is so divisive for so long. Maybe the country has passed the point of reconciliation between the differences.
Hopefully it's not passing that point yet. Hopefully we still be able to somehow reconcile with each other.
Or find a common ground with each other as well.
Find a common ground. It's a good way for democratic society. Anyway, talking about the state of Thailand before COVID happening, or before this political crisis we are in, Thailand is already in somewhat of bad economy situation. A lot of people, if you look at the figure, if you look at the index, it might not look that way, but if you talk to a lot of people on the street, that's how they feel. And this article from the German publication, Deutsche Welle, or DW in short, it is a German public international broadcaster, published an opinion piece on Thailand. It said, pandemic and protest, Thailand's double whammy. And said Thailand needs structural reforms to avoid falling into the middle income trap. The article talks about how the growing civil unrest across Thailand could bring a big blow to the economy, which was already battered by the COVID-19 pandemic. The Thai economy saw its worst contraction in over 2 decades in the second quarter, shrinking by as much as 12.2% as the coronavirus outbreak battered the key drivers of trade and tourism. The International Monetary Fund, or IMF, expects the economy to contract by 7.1% this year, lagging behind most of the countries in Southeast Asia, despite having handled the COVID-19 relatively well and praised by the global community. DW quotes a businessman in the hospitality industry in Phuket, who is also an anti-government protest supporter. He said that the pandemic is the final nail in the coffin. He said the economy, the hotels, the tourism sector were already in the downward spiral. He blames Prime Minister Prayut for the management. But not just from the anti-government camp, the experts also said that something similar. Thai economy is already crippled, and the protests could hurt the country by keeping away tourists and holding back people from spending and companies from making investment. A senior Asia economist, Garrett Lether, said that one of the good things in a way about these protests happening now is that tourism has been completely wiped out. So it cannot fall any further. I am not sure if that is really a good thing. However, consumer sentiment and business sentiment are still going to be affected, especially if the protests drag out longer. So experts say that Thailand must boost productivity, especially that of manufacturing firms, and revive private investment. And if Thailand fails to do so, the country might fall into a middle income trap, where the country is no longer poor, but does not see enough income and productivity growth to break into the group of rich countries. So at the end, the article criticized Prime Minister Prayut that he has not shown much willingness to push for radical reforms, such as lifting restrictive laws that discourage foreign firms and skilled professionals from entering the domestic market.
It seems like everyone is blaming on the Prime Minister for whether it's the economic slowdown because of the pandemic or even the ongoing protests. But it is true that it's a challenge for every single government to balance between reviving the economy and containing the virus. And the article by Deutsche Welle actually reflected on that very well. And just so you know, these are the stories we've also been following today.
The cabinet today has agreed to extend the state of emergency until the end of November to curb the spread of the coronavirus. Meanwhile, 13 new cases of COVID-19 have been recorded today, who returned from the United States, Bangladesh, Jordan, Germany, the United Arab Emirates, France, Russia, and the United Kingdom. All of them are now under state quarantine. The new cases brought the total number of infections to 3,759, with 10 new recoveries and no new fatalities. Typhoon Molave is expected to weaken into a tropical storm when it hits the northeastern region of Thailand. This will bring widespread heavy and isolated very heavy rainfall to several northeastern, eastern, and southern provinces today and tomorrow. The Meteorological Office also warned people living in lowlands or at the feet of mountains to brace for possible floods. Typhoon Molave has hit Vietnam, causing at least 2 deaths and 26 people missing. At least 40,000 people have been evacuated to emergency shelters farther inland from coastal villages. 5 airports were closed as the typhoon approached, with more than 200 flights cancelled. Train services were also suspended and will resume when the weather improves.
And we'll be leaving you tonight with beautiful images of the Northern Lights in Finland. And I think it's somewhere we all want to be once in a lifetime.
Yes, that's true.
And that wraps up tonight's edition of Thai PBS World Tonight. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you tomorrow. สวัสดีค่ะ
สวัสดีค่ะ